Yep, there we go.
There. Maybe move it closer so you get more of a close-up of just what's going on over here.
Oh, well, she couldn't get it low enough.
Oh,
Yeah.
never mind.
You can zoom in for a minute.
Okay.
All right.
We got it?
Good.
All right, so this is intro to splinting. I'm going to review a couple things that you would have had in your lecture notes and then show you how to make a pattern. So first of all, here's your resource. This is a great resource. Don't sell it, keep it, use it. I would also say keep your patterns because you can keep them in a file folder and write what pattern, like what I literally do is when I make a pattern, I write why I used it, the type of patient and that kind of thing on the pattern, and then I keep it on a file folder so that I have all of those so that if I can't remember, I look. The other thing you can do is use your Patterson Medical book. So in here, there's a whole section on splinting and or whatever the current version, whatever catalog, I don't mean to be plugging Patterson Medical, but whatever vendor you have that does splint material, then use them because it's all in there and it'll tell you exactly how high the temperature of something needs to be, what type of splints you can make out of it. All that information's in here in case you don't have your splint book. So it's also a really good thing to do. So what we're going to do today is make what we used to call wrist cock-up splints. And let's see, what do we do with our patterns? I mean our splints. We put it back in there?
Mm-hmm.
So while Helene's going to go be Vanna for us and get us some samples, I'll talk to you about, we're going to make ones that, for one reason or another, immobilize your wrist. So this is an ulnar one, and it's going to be fit on the side, like so. And there's some good parts about that, and there's some bad parts about that. If you look at that, you can see that maybe we might make this splint because we need something on the ulnar side, especially like a fracture of one of the carpal bones or a ligament, like the TFCC that you'll learn about in kines. Something is requiring stability. It's not entirely the most comfortable splint sometimes because of where it has to hit, which is right over your bony prominence. And so on some people that's worse than others and much more bonier. And so you just have to be careful with that and put a pad. We'll talk about that later. Then there's just what we call just a thumb hole one, and it's still a wrist splint, and then your straps would go over. And so this creates, again, stability, where you might need stability because there's more surface area here, so it's going to be more stable than our last version, which is what is called a cock-up splint, but it typically, nowadays, is actually made not as a cock-up splint, but is made as what we say more of a neutral splint. Because what we found is that if we cock the wrist too much, then we're having problems because we're cocking the wrist and then we're creating pressure on the nerve. And a lot of times, these splints right here are custom made for people who have had poor success with an over-a-counter, like a Futura splint or something like that, a neoprene. Bree, would you mind grabbing one of those out of that for me? A neoprene one? Yeah, especially good too. So they might make a custom one, and then it would be fitted directly for them. And some people like those better, some people don't. My experience, oh no, not that one, the black, I think it's black.
Yeah, the black one?
Oh, black. Let's see if it's in there. In terms of this particular splint, we use it a lot for carpal tunnel, sometimes for a wrist fracture right after when their wrist is really weak, it might support it. Sometimes if they just have like a tendonitis in their wrist extensor muscles and they want to just let it rest for a little bit, that'll work as well. If it has something that requires the thumb to be immobilized, none of these work. If you notice, they were all free, and if they're made properly, they should let your thumb oppose to your small finger, and that's one of the tests that will happen that you need to create enough movement here that your thumb can get over, but not too much that it creates not enough stability here, and that's what happens if you bring it too far. Same with this one. With the thumb hole, you should still be able to, if it's made properly, you should still be able to come over this way. While we're talking about made properly, The other thing that these particular splints are all designed to do, all three of them, is that you should be able to bend your fist down all of the way. And so you should be able, your MP should fully be able to flex. And to do that, the distal palmar crease right here needs to be free. You need to have the splint material by the time the book shows that you fold it, where you fold the top part over. You could do that, or you can just smooth this part away as you're finishing it, either way. But it needs to be below the crease so that you can go ahead and make a full fist. Because otherwise what will happen when they're not made properly, it's up here. And then what happens, if the splint comes to here and they can't come down, then they don't have a full fist anymore, and they actually lose motion because you made a splint wrong. So that's a really bad thing. Although sometimes you would want a block. You want it intentionally high because the doc may not want it all the way down. So it just depends what's needed. On all of these cases, we're assuming that we're making a full fist because we want that mobility. But for one reason or another, it's a fracture, it's a tendonitis, it's the nerve. You could have had a trauma to the nerve. You could have an irritation to the nerve. You could have a nerve, even a repair. You have to immobilize one reason or another at the wrist. In all splinting, you only want to do splinting when when you need to, and then you want to work out of it, because if you keep into it at all times, then you're going to both get stiffness and you're going to get weakness. So you don't want to stay in the splint for too long if you can help it, because of those things that happen just as a natural course of disuse. And in addition to kind of loss of function of your palm kind of thing here as well. Another reason to use this one that I didn't mention is also if you maybe had like some reason that prevents you. You could have like pins sticking out right here, an open wound, or some reason that you can't stabilize the wrist because something's going on over here and it needs to be free. You could put it on that side and still stabilize the wrist from the ulnar side. There are a bunch of pins, like if you had a crush injury and you had like 5 pins sticking out this side, then you wouldn't be able to make a wrist cup though. Okay, so that's our 3 basic splints that we're going to make. You and your partner are going to make one. One's going to make one version, one of the 3, and the other's going to make a different version. So you're making a different splints, and you're also going to use different materials. And I'm going to get to that in a second. So that's the splints that you'll be making. In the splinting book is chapter 7, Splints Acting on the Wrist. There are patterns specifically for basically this one, which is basically like a rectangle, and this one, but not this one. But I'm going to go through and show you how to do that in just a second so you can see them. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Just to review really quickly, you should have had this already in lecture, and you can look in your Patterson when you forget about what you've learned, because it's all there, or whatever. We give you the Patterson, so because that's what they give us. So the vendor, but you know, whatever kind of magazine that you get in the mail that sells splint material would have it. So this just has all the different splint materials. You can see some of them. These are maybe I'll come a little closer so y'all can see a little better. Kevin, can you look on there and see if they can see this? So this series is Aquaplast, and they have sort of a clearer look to them, and they have most of the Aquaplast has a nice feature that when you drop it back in the water, it has memory, most of it, and it will come right back to its shape. So it's really good for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing or working with a difficult patient, because you can start right back over. That's different from something like Polyflex, which is this one, which just looks like all the rest, but it grows on you, and it doesn't have memory. So once it grows, it stays grown, and it'll become too big. If you hold it like this, it will just continue to go. Is that Patrick? Go ahead and push stop for a second.